Hi there, and welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Podcast. My name is Patrick Francie, and I am your host. And I want to begin by saying thank you for listening. On this show, I am having conversations with seemingly ordinary individuals who have achieved some amazing and extraordinary results in both their life and business. My intention is to inspire and help you learn and grow by having my guests share their journey of how they face and overcome their challenges, but also how they celebrate their many wins. And now, let's get on with this show and have a conversation with today's guest. Hey folks, Patrick Francie here, host and creator of The Everyday Millionaire, inviting you to listen in with my guest today, E.B. Tucker. Now, like you, I'm always looking to grow my wealth and to manage my risks. And by having guests like E.B. on the show, we get some insights from best-selling authors like E.B., as well as his insights in what he's doing. Before we get started, just a polite ask to make sure you like, to comment, to subscribe to this channel. Look forward to having this conversation with EB. He is the author of his book, Why Gold, Why Now? The War Against Your Wealth and How to Win It, as well as he provides, like his book, many very rich insights and strategic advice on what's happening in the world today, both economically and even societal. So listen in, enjoy this conversation. E.B. Tucker, welcome to the Everyday Millionaire Podcast. It's so good to have you on the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for asking me.
Now, E.B., I've been following you for, I think, about 4 years. So it was pre the world lockdown shit that went on and, all the things that happened. But you really got me on this path of understanding gold and all sorts of things. And I want to talk about that. But as much as I do the intros into it, I always like to ask my guests, when somebody walks up to you, EB, given all you do, when somebody says, EB, what do you do? What's your answer to that question these days?
You have a good time.
Have a good time.
Yeah, okay. You're not. This isn't going to go on forever. That's the unfortunate news that nobody told me when I was younger, is that this doesn't go on forever. And I was talking to a friend of mine today that has a bunch of little kids, and I was telling him, I was like, look, don't put off anything. Like, they're taking their little kids on a trip, and I said, if they want to do something, do it. If you see something the family wants to do it. Live now. Don't. A lot of times when you're trying to work hard and build, you're always delaying things, right? You're saying, well, I'm a frugal person, so I'll, it doesn't mean like spend yourself, into oblivion. It just means the best thing you can do for your long-term success is to live a balanced life. And part of that is to make sure that you are enjoying experiences with people that you enjoy being around now. And that was hard for me, right? Everybody in the US always says they came from a difficult, every single person that you talk to that's successful in the US, they're like, I was born dirt poor, and it's like, how is it that all you guys were born poor and ended up, I don't even believe it, to be honest with you. But the thing is, I wasn't born poor, but I also wasn't born super rich either. It was kind of, I knew I was going to go to college, right? Like I knew, my dad had a little furniture store. So it wasn't like, I was like, going without heat or something, but I definitely, I didn't have excessively nice things. Like as a kid, I knew I knew I wanted independence. Right. And so the problem, going back to your question, is that I was so focused on achieving that I, a lot of times, did not enjoy the process because I was so fixated on the goal. And it didn't mean material. It wasn't like a material thing. It was like I was determined to not be confined and put into a cube or a box and all these things. And I was willing to go without everything, even personal relationships, even enjoying small pleasures. I was willing to do without anything to get my goal. And if you read goal setting books, they talk about this, but I would say now in my life, I realize you can have both. you can have both of those things. You can enjoy your every single moment of your journey now. And when you do that, I'm telling you, magical stuff happens. You notice more opportunities when you're living a balanced life than when you're on tunnel vision.
So that's an interesting point of entry into a conversation. So when you look at your best-selling author of your book, Why Gold, Why Now, which was the war against your wealth and how to win it. I mean, that is I found that book really quite fascinating. Now, I've been investing in gold. I've been buying gold. I've been exchanging fiat currency for gold, just to be clear on that. When I look at gold from an investment point of view, I'm careful, a little more careful these days about the language that I'm using. But aside from that, I mean, you were in financial markets, you're an entrepreneur, you're a busy guy. So given all of that, was there a fork in the road that something happened, an incident, or what was the realization that's going, hold on, I got to get my head out of my ass and kind of get focused on life in general, having fun.
Yes.
So driven.
Yes. I mean, I'm not quite as young as I look. I was trapped in sales jobs initially when I was younger. It's because I'm a decent communicator, and people thought this guy would really be able to sell a lot of our widgets. And so I kept getting hired for these sales jobs. And one of the guys that I worked for was a really smart guy. I'm still in touch with him. This is going back 20 years. I'm going to see him in a few weeks. And he fired me. And he fired me because he said, if you don't work in finance, you're gonna miss one of the great opportunities of life. And yeah, and so he gave me I worked for this wholesale furniture company, there was a manufacturing company, and there was 400 salesmen, and I was like number 3 or something, and so I was making money, but he was like, you don't understand, like this guy had a bunch of money. He had his own company that he sold, and he was kind of like trapped to keep working there, but he had like made a pile of money, and he kind of took me on as he was a bit of like a fatherly figure. And he was like, you're sitting down and telling me about stuff that you think, and I'm reading about this from funds that I'm invested in, like private partnerships and stuff. And like you this is all you think about, and you're making 6 figures. And this, like in the early 2000s, that was like kind of a lot of money. I mean, it felt like a lot of money. And he was like, but you're already at the top of this game. And if you don't use this fire that you have in this other way, you're going to regret. Now, that was a double-edged sword, because I had no idea. I was applying for jobs, trying to go to New York, trying to do all these things, couldn't make anything happen. And I would say maybe 18 months later, I was fired from a job that I wasn't very good at. And that was when I couldn't find anything. And I just, like, by default, was starting to write. And I was writing on like a blog. There was this thing called Blogspot back then. And I was writing on this Blogspot, and so that was like when everything started. And that was a game changer, because when you write, you have to really, really be serious about your ideas. I mean, you can't just like say these like flippant things. You have to really be serious, and it's publicly. It's kind of like if you're a noisy kid in school, the way to deal with that kid is to give them a job.
Yeah.
And so that's what happened. And then I just started, like, it was this weird time where I was unemployed. Okay. So I collected unemployment. So, I was unemployed. I had a roommate. Like, I had a house, but I had a little like 3-bed, 2-bath, like little ranch, tiny house. And, and I had a roommate that, cause I needed help like paying for it. And I just stripped everything. Like I had a car, and then I got like this, my friend has a junkyard, and he got me this like F-150 from a road crew, like from a paving crew. It was used. It was $1,800. Yeah. And it had a bench seat. I mean, it turned out to be one of the best times of my life, because I would go on dates in the F-150, and there were 2 kinds of dates. One kind of date said, is this a joke? Right. The other date said, wow, there's a bench seat, which means I could sit next to you, like you're in like a country Western song or something.
Yeah.
And so just looking back on it, that was a great time. And anyway, but the point is that things got very serious, and I'd made a lot of choices. I made a lot of life choices that we don't get into that like I just really decided that this is what I wanted, was independence. And I wanted intellectual independence. I didn't have necessarily money goals. I wanted intellectual freedom. And in order to have intellectual freedom, I needed financial freedom. But financial freedom is not what you think. Like the F-150 truck was paid for. Now you have a vehicle. Well, and then I had a house. I had this like little house, and I had this guy, renting the room from me. And so yeah, I mean, I was collecting unemployment. I mean, technically speaking, I was like, started that journey to financial independence, which was necessary so that I could have intellectual independence. And again, I want to characterize, I mean, it wasn't like I was, like eating spam or something. I mean, it was lean. It was lean, but it wasn't like the grapes of wrath or something. It was like I was choosing. Because see, what happened next is I was writing this blog, and I'd been trading Fannie Mae puts and Countrywide puts and all this stuff, and I'd been losing money. And so I was like I was just kind of like griping about this. I was like, I don't understand. And, like the housing's all this stuff. And then it all started to happen. And I didn't really make money in that trade. Like a lot of people like famously made money in that. I didn't really make any money. But what happened was I did a ton of homework and I lost money. And I lost like 20 grand or something. And it wasn't like a lot of money, but it was like I kept these puts. I kept buying these puts like not one after another, and they just kept expiring worthless. And so I had done all this work, and then when the mortgage thing started to unwind, I was like ready. I was really ready because all that work that I had done didn't make any money, but I had this like immense amount of knowledge. And so
this is 2000, when you say when the mortgage thing started happening, you talk about 2008 GFC?
Exactly. And I had some like, so what I did is I was writing at the time. I mean, and I'm talking like 100 people are reading my stuff, and mostly because I'm like, anybody that emails me, I'm like putting their name into my blog spot. And so it's like, I'm really pushing it. And I started writing about how this was going to be like this was going to be like the Halley's Comet of opportunities to buy rental property. And I'm telling you, man, people were so hostile about this theory. And part of the reason why is because like I'd never owned any rental property, but I always like wanted rental property. I was like, it's my granddad had some rental property and he get these checks. And I was like, this is so cool. And so I think looking back on it, it was because what I was saying is the deal has to work at that time on cash numbers. And nobody thought that way. And so I built this little Excel model where I just would plug in like anticipated rent and repairs, all this stuff. And then I would like divide that by X, and that would give me my price, And so I was like writing about this, and everybody was like, this won't work, And I'm telling you, if you're young right now, like this is 16 years ago, I'm telling you, we thought then that real estate might never go up again. And so, the modeling was like, if real estate never goes up again, can I make money? Yeah. And so what I did was I targeted a scenario where I could make 18 to 20% on my money if real estate never went up again.
Right.
And I did that. And so I took my whole IRA, I guess in Canada it's the RRSP or something. But anyway, I took like the whole retirement account, and you can liquidate it, and you pay like a 10% penalty, and then you pay income tax. Well, my income was zero because I was collecting unemployment, so I had no income. And so my accounting guy was like, yeah, I mean, this is probably the lowest tax you'll have, It's like, so, and I bought like 6 houses cash. Cash. I mean, like I paid about, like, the cheapest one I bought was $10 a square foot. Yeah. And so, and I guess these were like, it wasn't like they were brand new or anything. I mean, they needed some repair and all this stuff, but they all needed air conditioning and, plumbing repairs.
You had to put some money into them. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a tremendous amount, but I mean, I had to put money into, but just for if people aren't into the real estate scene, like I would think now it probably costs $150 a foot to build like a basic dwelling or something in the US. I'm guessing, but it's probably roundabout close. And then I got a guy. I was at the Verizon store. I met this guy that had like this van with Ron Paul stickers all over it. Remember Ron Paul? And the guy was like this, like just this, like, patriotic kind of like. I was like, yeah, you love Ron Paul? He's like, yeah, man. He's like, he's going to save this country. Anyway, and he was like a welder and all. He had all these skills, and so I got this guy to work for me. And then I got this painter guy off Craigslist that was kind of a volatile personality, and that was my crew. We picked up other people as we needed them, and we repaired all these places. And then I met this investor that wanted the same thing. I made some money, like $100,000 doing that, and anyway. So like that wouldn't have happened. The reason I'm giving you all that detail is that none of that would have happened if I didn't get fired, right? Have the ideas, crystallize the ideas, take the risk. It was like, because we can talk later about more things happened after that, right? Because I really don't like real estate. I mean, I actually, like, fundamentally, it's not like I hate real estate, but I don't really like real estate that much. And so,
well, in a recent interview, I don't remember who it was with, Danielle Camboni or somebody. Anyways, along the way, I've seen some of your interviews, and you've actually exited your real estate in the past couple of years.
I sold all that stuff. Yeah, I sold all that. So now, and by the way, I calculated that because I had it like in an LLC in a company, and so I calculated the total rent received and total spread between cost and so anyway, it was over 1,000% on that trade, and that sounds like a lot of money. Now, it was tax advantaged as well because you have some like income tax. You pay very low income tax when you're working through that. But to give you some frame of reference, I also could have made 1,000% buying Amazon stock and doing absolutely nothing. Now, I'm not comparing apples to apples here, but what I'm saying is that I did feel like I sold everything. Okay, so in 2022, in February, I got a call from the guy that was managing the properties for me at the time, and I was super annoyed with the whole process, and I was annoyed with him and everybody. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to sell these things. And so I just like impulsively listed all of them with this. I listed one with this lady that I use for all the real estate stuff I do. I have this like aggressive lady. She's like, if I called her at 3:00 in the morning, she'd answer. She's always available. And nobody hustles like her. And so I called her and listed one. And then 2 days later, I was like, just list all of them. And so I sold all of them. And it turns out that they all sold before the rates, not before the rates, and the rates went up one time or something. And they were basically all under contract except one. And then the market started getting soft, and I blew out. I took a slightly lowball offer on the last one and got rid of it. I got rid of all of them. So now I don't have any, but I am looking at some things in that. I was just on a call today with some guys that are buying trailer parks that one of the guys I'm like really impressed by. And so I might do something like that, but it's totally passive. It's not like
you're being a capital partner and all.
I just think that the guy that was calling me, like I've known him, he used to lease workforce housing, like low income housing, and he's just like really on top of things. And I'm like, I just think the odds of him being successful are really high. And so like they showed me, a deal that's like they have a fair promote split and like, anyway, I was like, I think this will probably work. I'm not necessarily like massively bullish on real estate. It's not like I'm like charging into real estate, but I think if you're, you know this, when you have to think about all sides of things. And like sometimes you see a person and you're like, this is a guy that like definitely if he fails, it's going to be like not because of laziness.
So when you look at real estate and what's going on in the markets overall, what's happening in the US, you've got some idea what's going on in Canada. I mean, we spoke very briefly in Vancouver at the investor conference, the resource conference. But you spent a little bit of time, what I'm seeing is a lot of Canadians, they're taking their real estate capital or capital they would normally invest in Canadian real estate. They're going, no, I'm going to the US. So when you look at real estate in the US, are you somewhat optimistic about where it's going? I mean, when we look at what's happening overall with central banks, global market, threats of wars, I mean, do you think real estate's a good play overall in the US, or what's your kind of read on it right now?
I mean, I'm not like necessarily bullish on it. I just think that if you can pin down the model and you can say there's some tax advantage, I'm not totally leverage stuck, right? Like, these guys are doing these trailer parks at like 30% leverage or something. And I'm like, it's just really hard to get flushed, when you've got something like that going on. And I think that's the way to look at it, is like, you can't, the newsletter I wrote today, people can read that at ebtucker.com. I mean, it's all about how the U.S. economy is centrally controlled. So you have like these central planners that do everything, and so it's impossible to like try to forecast unless you start thinking about what they might be thinking. Then you can forecast, right? Or what their motivations are, which is not that hard to do. And so, but my point is that it's not a time where it's not that Halley's Comet moment for real estate.
Right.
And so I think that when you look at deals, you got to say to yourself, the thing about the lower end stuff that makes sense now is like, it's all about laziness versus hard work. I mean, I just really understand that part of the market and how it's difficult to leverage. I think where you get in trouble now is if you're doing like a class A property at like a low cap rate. I think that it's like you're really banking on rates coming down.
Yeah.
So you're banking on being able to refinance later. So I just don't think that's a good bet, because it's like, how can you predict what a room full of people is going to do
these days? You
can't do it. I mean, I think you have to change your thinking to accommodate that.
Yeah.
And then you just have to say, like, I might miss out. I mean, I might miss out, but property can only go up for a few different reasons. Number one, income can go up. So income's got to rise faster than expenses. So that's one way property can go up. The second way property can go up is financing costs can come down.
Yeah.
Those are the only two ways that it can go up. This could be a change in the tax code or something, but basically those are the two things to look at. And expenses have gone up a lot and income has gone up a little bit. And so that's not really, are we forecasting higher? I don't think people could afford that much more.
It's an interesting time, isn't it? When we look at what's happening here in Canada with the immigration that's off the charts, which is what's happening in the US. I mean, we have a huge supply issue, a significant supply issue that we can't keep up. We don't have the labor to build it fast enough to accommodate the people that are coming into the country. Yeah. And it's really out of control and off the charts, which is somewhat, in certain parts of the US, where I'm watching a little bit of what's going on in Texas, for example. And, when you look at the number of immigrants coming into the US, it really is, shocking of the people that are coming out west, if you will, if you use that term. And how are you going to accommodate them? You got to house them. I mean, you guys are putting them in schools, and it's like sleep there for now.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's like in the U.S. The thing that's just like a real bummer is that the building kind of the attitude towards constructing is really broken. I just ordered this book. I'm going to write about this in the newsletter. There's like a personal section in the bottom, and but I ordered this book. There's this thing in the U.S. in the post World War II era called the case study houses, and a magazine. You might already know about this, but a magazine called like Arts and Architecture came up with this idea where they would have these case study houses that they would have architects build. And it was a twofold purpose. Like, number one, the architect could flex their ability to create aesthetic, and that's what they like to do. And then number two, they were like, then we can study that and try to find mass production ways to, incorporate some of these design elements and things. And when you look at these houses, like, it's unbelievable how forward leaning the design was and how cool they were. And sometimes they were able to use materials like terrazzo and, to work with concrete in certain ways, and to use glass to work with, lighting and how that changed. That's all gone. It's gone. Now we build aluminum stud, cardboard wall, and we build it for a certain lifespan, and then we tear it down and build it again. And it's fine because it's very mechanical, but it just is a real bummer to do that and then just squeeze 5 cents out of it. And you just like, what is the point of all this, man? I mean, can't we build something that's fun, that you get a higher rent from owning it? You enjoy being the owner. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Maybe not. I mean, I'm starting to think no is the answer. And so then it's utilitarian is what we have. It's and utilitarian is not just in the materials; it's in the way we buy it too, right? It's all about, like, Barry Sternlicht, who. So I have a favorite hotel, and anyways, it's not really relevant because you could pick any hotel, but I have one that's my favorite, and Barry Sternlicht bought it, and he's going to ruin the place. I mean, I've already found that he's going to do all these changes and whatever. But anyway, he's like a billionaire, real estate investor in the U.S. Starwood Properties or whatever. And Sternlicht, is actually quite interesting to listen to, because he's like, he'll default on a property, and then the next day he's on Bloomberg talking about how he's geared up to buy distressed property, and he's really smart. And so he said the other day in this interview I watched, he was like, basically, I'm in the business of borrowing money. Mm-hmm. That's the business that I'm in. And it's super accurate, right? Because his job is to borrow money and buy stuff and then control it while it expands in value and then sell it. And it's really
kind of that's, Robert Kiyosaki basically says that in a different way, but he's the same guy. I'm just borrowing lots of money from the bank, and they're happy to give it to me. I wanted to depart from the real estate conversation a little bit, EB, and when we look at your background in the markets and in precious metals and mining and your experience and all of that, when we look at what's happening in the world today, I mean, it's one of the reasons that I picked up your book was we're COVID, it's going to be zombie apocalypse, the world's coming to an end, some version of a meltdown. I think a lot of people expected it to happen a lot sooner than it seems to be happening, or might happen, or might not happen, whatever the case is. I mean, when we're starting to look at investing and preparing for the future, how do you hold it? I mean, real estate's, one of those things that you say, okay, I can do the math. I understand the system. I understand the process. I can put my capital to work. I know the region. I know my demographics. So got it. I got real estate handled. But when we expand it, and when, I know one of your specialties, of course, is precious metals, hence your book, Why Gold, Why Now? So, but when you look at what's happening economically, how, as investors, should we be, protecting not only growing our net worth, but actually even risk mitigating or protecting what we've built, given what's going on in the world?
In the newsletter, I was asked to manage some assets for a trust, and so I decided to, with permission of the trust, to publish what I'm doing in the newsletter. Mm-hmm. And it's been really interesting because I love reading the comments that people leave, because people are really lost. I mean, the Fed has turned us all into junkies. So we grew up in this capitalist system. We have all these ideas about how you spend less than you earn, save the difference, invest in this capital, but it's all out the window. We're all speculators. That's what we are. And so we are supposed to own these things that go up in value. And then, the thing people miss is that the Fed actually wants us to be successful speculating, because one of the big holes in the U.S. budget right now is the capital gains tax numbers are down, because people made a lot of money in 2021 and 2022, and then they paid they were shocked that a lot of these people were like valet parking cars, and they were like trading options and with Dave Portnoy or something. They're like, I got to pay tax on all this. Anyway, but right now people aren't really realizing that many gains because everything's kind of like sideways. And I think it's really important to realize you're in a managed system, and the Fed wants you to be successful because over the long term, because they want you to stay working and they want you to invest in stuff and make money and pay tax. All right. So you got to play that game. So you got to, the likelihood of you having a tsunami wipeout type thing go on is low. And further, if that does happen, you don't want to be careful what you wish for, right? Because if the Western system goes down, you're part of that, like it or not, right? So you want this thing to chug along in one form or another. And so I feel like right now is a time that you need to take a balanced approach. You need to look at yourself as a trustee. See, everybody looks at themselves like they walked into a casino and they're going to try to leave with that spinning Mustang that is in there. And they're not going to do that. And a lot of times people get hung up on saying like, well, easy for you to say because you have tons of money. But you know what? The thing is, when you have tons of money, it's nothing like what you would think. It's not anything like what you would think. It's a whole different perspective. And what it does is it sends you back, and you realize that you got to get your habits right early, not once you have $100 million. Okay, you get your habits right, and you start realizing that if you've saved up any amount of money, and you want to maintain that. That's the number one thing you want to do, is you want to maintain it. So you want to shape your approach to money management now. You don't want to say, I'm going to gamble like some kind of sailor that stepped off, into port and is looking to have a wild night. I don't want to do that. I want to manage, like, I don't want to lose this amount of money. I also don't want to like put it into a savings account either. It's not like that. But
how do you hold risks then, EB? Like, because obviously you've put risk capital into lots of ventures.
Sure.
You've won some.
There's room for that. There's room for that now still. But in the trustee portfolio, I'm showing people that, okay, so I own some gold, and gold is not really an investment. Yeah. It's just like a holding pen for hard work. So I don't expect that to do a lot. I think that'll go to like 2150 this year. And I think that's people think that's a boring prediction, but that's $1 trillion in added value to the gold, to the value of all the gold in the world. It's kind of a lot. So I think you go to 2150. Then I think you got to own some Bitcoin. I don't think you got to own any other cryptocurrency, because I think Bitcoin is
that's it.
Is super. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just it's okay at 43,000. Let's see, I have it over here. 43,000. I think that's about like 900 billion or something of Bitcoin. I just was saying a minute ago that the gold price going to 2150 is about $1 trillion. That's more than all the Bitcoin. So just to give you some, and then so people say, well, wait a minute, are you like a crypto person? No, I think it's totally annoying to deal with crypto people. So I tried to explain to people that, let's say the trust has $1 million portfolio, hypothetically. Maybe I have 50 grand in gold. Maybe I have 30 grand in Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. Do you see how I'm thinking? So, and then I start looking at the other parts, like you were saying. Okay, so I want to own some stocks. I like stocks a lot. One of the sectors that I've been buying stocks for the trust and for myself is in cybersecurity. So I think that probably later this decade, there'll be some sort of mass cyber event. Obviously, I don't want that to happen. I'm not saying that I think that's a good thing. I'm just saying that I talk to a lot of corporate executives. I talk to a lot of C-level people. Every single company has a cyber chief now. And every cyber chief has no clue what they're doing. So
well, it's pretty new still, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So what they do is they just try to do everything. They have no idea how to buy protection.
Yeah.
And so they're just fumbling around with a checkbook. Like, okay, well, this will protect this and this will protect this. And so what that tells me is that, I mean, how many industries do you know that are that new? I mean, it's that is a unique set of circumstances. Like when you look at like a hurricane insurance, it's not new. I mean, you forecast, and it's been happening for a long time. But the fact that you could your app goes down and your employees are compromised and your business stops. Whoa! I mean, this is like, what would you pay to prevent that? Would you pay 1% of revenue? Yeah. I mean, well, what kind of number is that? Massive. So these companies are growing revenue at like 50% a year. It's crazy. And they have free cash flow multiples, that are like wild. So you got to own this stuff, right? So yeah. See how I'm starting to.
Yeah, you're now. I've got your paid. I think that's now. I do your paid subscription. I love your writing, by the way. I think you're very, very gifted, and I know you've been doing it a long time. I love your writing, but I got it. I think this morning. I want to say, but wasn't it a topic? I just glanced at it. I didn't have time to go through the whole thing, but wasn't that cyber, some companies that you were looking at, wasn't that part of the newsletter?
So it's past. Yeah. I mean, it's for like, it's the beginning of the newsletter is always about like what I think about what's going on kind of in the world right now. And then the paid stuff is like, you get into the portfolio, which is kind of what we're talking about. It's like, yeah, what I decided to do was, it's kind of like your question. It's like, well, what do you do with your money? I mean, it's to say to people like, okay, you want to own, I mean, you don't want to be like all in on risk right now. Okay. But you want to own some stuff. And so you pick out these sectors that you think are going to benefit from something that's going on. And then what you do is you pick two or three, like you try to wait for a little pullback and you pick, end up with two or three companies in that sector that you think is going to benefit. And then you play that trend out, right? So let's just say it's oil, right? So you think oil $80 is like not reasonable. It should probably be 100. So like, all right, let me pick like two or three ways to play that and put that trade on and I own that stuff. And you're not like looking for miracles to happen. You're not like, oh yeah, I'm going to buy this like 10-cent Vancouver stock that's going to change my life. That's not really see, that's another part of your money, right? Like, so the thing people get wrong is they put the wrong percentages. So the Moonshot Vancouver company should give you the chance to make 10 to 1. Yeah. So if something's going to give you the chance to make 10 to 1, what portion of your assets should you have exposed to that? Probably like 3. Yeah. So like for example, I've had like 100 to 1 Vancouver stock before, but everybody's like, wow, if you did $1 million in there, you have, but it's like, it doesn't work that way. So what I used to do, I don't really invest that much anymore in this type of stuff at the moment because the market's pretty dead there, as you know, but I would do 20 grand to any idea that somebody called me with that I had a relationship with them. Like has to be somebody like I know them in some way, like a lawyer or something would call me. Hey, what is 20? Yeah, I'll give you 20 grand. It was always 20 grand. So I didn't like do more or less because I thought something that sounded good. See, the 100 to 1 that I had, I thought it sounded like a complete stupid idea and ended up being perfect. But my point is that what portion of your money, if something's got the potential to do something big, then it should be a really small portion of your money. Mm-hmm. Does this make sense? It's like, totally. and so when you look at where you want to put all your eggs, I mean, you just don't have to have like massive catapulting success with your investment because you can't I'm sure you've had one of these. You never think in the beginning it's going to be the one. Does that make sense? Totally. It's always like by accident that happens.
It's interesting though, right? Because when somebody pitches you a deal and if in some way in that conversation you hear a 10 to 1 possibility, the emotion of it will drive the decision rather than the common sense about it. And something that I want to go back to that you said, which you talked about habits is creating, habits early on in your life, and that maybe eliminates some of that emotion, and that you're creating those habits. But when I look at, and when we think about it, I just got this stat recently, is that by the data based on attention spans, a goldfish now has more attention span, or as much attention span as a human being, which is about 3 seconds right now, is what the data is showing. Hard to believe. But the point of that is that, how do we educate ourselves, or how do people, have the habit of taking the time to educate themselves, so that when they see these deals, they're not going all in, or they're doing the research that they need to do to make decisions, as opposed to emotionally, scratching checks. You follow that thought process? And
of course. I mean, first of all, people should not be too hard on themselves for being human. I think it's kind of like, I try to, with my friends and with people that I'm socially spend time with, I try to be like, I'm like super kind of liberal minded in life sense, where I don't really think a lot of things are a big deal. Right. So like, I see people struggle a lot with like, I call it should behavior. Like, I should do this, or I should not do this, and whatever. And I always try to like say to them, like, try not to be so hard on yourself, because it's you're a human. So inevitably you're going to get overexcited or over pessimistic, and you can't totally breathe that out of your life. And so I think what you want to go for is you want to go with the flow of your life experience. Like, it's inevitable you're going to go too heavy or too light, or you're going to have something happen that wasn't what you thought was going to happen, and you're going to say, "God, it's so awful. Can't believe it." Well, it's not really that awful. It's just now part of your resume. And so I think when you do it long enough, you realize that it's your habits that shape where you end up. Mm-hmm. And so one thing I do is, like, I have all these pads around, like these Japanese pads, and I have all these things all over the place. And I'm always like writing down. I change it over time. It's not like, but I have all these things that I'll set the course for myself. And I call it, like, have you ever baked a cake out of a box? It says like, 1 egg and half a cup of flour. And it's like, you just do what that says and you get a cake, right? So I'm always like setting up a certain thing I'm going to do. Like one of the things I'm doing right now is, like, I'm riding my bike for 30 minutes every day, and I'm like riding it to downtown to like do things and whatever. And part of the reason why I'm doing that is because, like, I play tennis and I haven't been doing any cardio, and I'm like winded on the tennis court. I'm like, am I dying out here? And so anyway, so my point is, I write down like my routine, right? And then I do the routine, and then I play tennis, and I'm like good to go. So with your life, it's like people have got to take the time to say, like, they got to come up with a little Duncan Hines cake recipe, and then you can change it over time. You don't just like leave it that way forever. I mean, you can get a bigger cake recipe, right? Or whatever. You can make a pie sometime, but like, people don't do this. They don't take the time to do this, because they think either only successful people do this or whatever. And it's like, no, you don't get it. You can do this now, and things on your list will grow faster than if you just wing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
So when you look at what's going on in the world today, I mean, you do lots of research, you're well read, you see what's going on in the world because you're playing in the markets, you understand gold markets, you're doing a lot of things. So when you look at what's happening globally, global macro, central banks, wars, maybe wars, civil unrest, France is melting down, London's a shit show. Like, when you look at all of what's happening, EB, how do you maintain some sense of, I don't know, optimism or hope, or where are you in that scale of how you see the world these days, given what seems to be unfolding?
Well, my friend, I have a friend named Vince that says that he got a lot happier when he gave up hope. And okay. It's like, it's fun because it's fun to have philosophical statements and to think about them. Yeah. But I'm not really hopeful, because I think that we're flowing down the river of life, and we have this idea that if we could just make it like we saw up there, then it would be better. but it's not true. You're always, it's constantly changing. And what's happening now is people have become extremely disconnected from reality. And the reason they've become disconnected from reality is because they've accepted a life that's easy. What's happened is reality is being shaped for them. And so they have willingly stepped into this kind of situation where they're upset all the time, they're anxious, they're worried, they're fearful, they're a lot of times their health is not great by their own choosing, and they can't remember what they were upset about a week ago, but whatever's happening now is this big thing. And so what you see is that the media accounts of what's happening are not really accurate. And so one of the things that I do is I have no television. I've had no television. And I don't, a lot of people say, oh, I don't have cable, but it's like, I don't have a television, right? So, I mean, when my kids, I have 2 kids, they come on the weekend, and people, what do you do with them? Well, we play, Rummy Cube. If you ever play that, it's one of my favorite games. We play a lot of games. We play tennis. We swim in the pool, listen to music. We go on. I have a classic car we drive around in. So we do all this stuff, And the reason why we do that is because I want to connect them with life as a human as much as possible. Because what we've done when we accept this like manufactured reality is we get rid of our ability to make any sort of discerning decision about anything. Okay. And there's no way you can be successful if you're being whipped around, by some sort of external force. And so the more you back up and calmly look at things, the more obvious it seems. You're in this scenario right now in the US where all the things you're being told are fake. Like, for example, Putin is a bad person who has to be stopped and is doing all these okay, great. Now, but wait a minute. But a Swiss energy company last weekend, Swiss, okay, not US, Swiss, was taking oil or oil-related product from a ship that came from Russia, transferred it in the international water, and then was protected by the US military from the Houthis. You see what I'm saying? So you start realizing the US is under a lot of pressure. Like, it's under a lot of pressure right now. And it's got its population totally sedated so that it can, but now it's going to maintain its vast power structure around the world. Well, that is like, make the popcorn, because the action part is just about to happen. It's like, you don't want to miss what's coming next. So my point is that I think you've got to, with a sober mind, to watch that stuff without some sort of like outcome. It doesn't have to be some certain way. Like, I'm an avid traveler. I travel a lot, and I am going to different places now that I used to go to, because in my opinion, the world is cordoning off into zones, and I need to stay in my zone. Now I'm from the United States, and so technically I'm a US citizen, but I don't care about being a US citizen, because you got to be born somewhere, and you can't not be a citizen of somewhere. And this just happens to be where my parents live. That's the way that I see it. So I'm kind of like agnostic about, I don't have this idea that, if America would change to suit my vision, it will be better or it'll be worse. It just is what it is. And so I think it's hard over time. For the last 30 years, we've been living in this situation where people have wisely coaxed the average person into total delusion. And so now that's gone for a while now. And so now you have, when you're a kid, you think the Wizard of Oz, there's someone behind the curtain. It's not true. There's actually, like, I've met people, names that I'm not going to say because who these names are, that are very, very powerful people. There's like a pyramid of power, right? And so you don't want to be at the top of it, because at the top of it, when there's nobody else to take from, you turn on each other. And so like, you can watch what's happening right now, and you can say, like, good luck to you, because like, you've painted yourself into a corner, and now you're going to fight over the corner. I mean, I don't want to be in that fight. Like, I want to stay out of that fight. I don't want to be, I want to survive that fight. Like, if you grew up in Middle Ages, England or something, right? Like, you just want to stay out of the way if your feudal lord is fighting to the death over something. You don't want to be trying to make money off that. You want to be like, you want to live through that fight. That's what you want to do. And so, because you'll live to you'll have another day. I mean, and so right now we're in this spot where, like, the U.S. has got to make some choices between defending its currency, defending its financial web that it's created around the world, defending the parts of the world that it says it's going to control. Like, for example, I'll give you a specific example. Like, Strait of Malacca, Indian Ocean, like this region right now is like fully tilting Chinese. And if you think about it, like, if you start adding up what moves through there, and then you say, well, look at India. I mean, like, there's a battle for India, which is isolated. I mean, India is like completely surrounded now by Chinese influence. And so it's really strange, right? Because you start looking at all these pieces on the board, and a lot of people are into like frontier investing, which I've never had success with, because it's extremely difficult to take Western ideas and apply them, to markets that are in places that don't have Western structures around them.
Yeah.
And so it's not impossible, but it's very difficult. And so this is a time where I'm watching all this happen, and that's what shapes the mentality of what I'm investing in. And so that you as a reader, you probably start seeing, like, that's why my job as the trustee is not to do something dramatic. It's to be able to say, if I lose on something, to be able to explain myself. So, well, this is what I was thinking, and it didn't work out.
What I found is that, around television, I have a television, but we don't watch anything mainstream. We never watch mainstream news. It's almost like it's such a waste of time. I can't watch anything mainstream in Canada, particularly. I mean, we pick up what we pick up from the US, but I mean, when you look at mainstream media, or what was referred to, I guess, these days as legacy media, I mean, they're nothing compared to the Joe Rogans, the Tuckers, the different YouTube channels that are out there that are getting millions of views, but are actually coming forward with some good food for thought in terms of what's unfolding in the world. So we know that what is occurring in, the past 3 or 4 years, given COVID and all the things that went on. I mean, the point is around all of this is, all of these things have been unfolding for a long time, for whatever reason and whatever agenda there might be, we don't know. Ultimately, we see the divisiveness of West and East. We see the divisiveness of what's going on in the U.S. Republican, Democrats always been there. Liberal, conservative, always been there. It just seems louder, more divisive, more polarized. People are angrier, which would lead to me to believe, and based on what limited psychology I know, is that anger is always driven by fear. And, when you break it down at the heart of it, anger is always driven by fear of loss, fear of something in that regard. So I'm looking at it right now, and I step back from it. I do lots of research, probably not unlike you, probably different in the space I play in. But the point is that how do we, what are you stay grounded, you work at staying grounded, you stay healthy, you work out, you hang out with your family, you stay out of the fray of all of the media as much as you can. But how are you guiding even your clients, your friends, yourself? Like, what's the game that you're playing mentally, saying, okay, how do I not only survive this, but thrive in this? And, is that through diversified portfolio, looking for those opportunities? And do you still hold out optimism for that future, being able to pull that all off? Like, you're seeing it as an opportunity more than you're seeing it as shit's hitting the fan.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, I'm not an optimistic person, and yet I still charge. It's people have a hard time with that, but I think the thing people miss is that the numbers are going to get bigger.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wrote this thing a long time ago about how the U.S. debt doubles under every 8-year presidential cycle, and you go back to Carter, and or forward, and it's true. You just pick 8 years, and it tends to double every 8 years. And so I wrote that during Trump, and people got like really upset about Trump. And I'm like, it has nothing to do with the candidate. I mean, you can put a German Shepherd in there, and it doubles every 8 years. And so now it's almost doubled. I mean, it's like 34 trillion or something. And so need another 2 trillion to when it would have doubled. And I'm sure they could pull it off. And the thing is that they need the tax base to keep growing too.
Yeah.
So it's like the thing is going up. I mean, it's just going up.
Look at Canada, look at the US. I mean, we're beyond, I mean, to your point, whatever trillion the US is in debt, Canada is in debt, whatever. I think we are over $1 trillion, which for a country of 38 million is a lot. And when you consider interest rates, the debt servicing portion of that, I mean, the pundits who are paying attention to that are all suggesting that it's all about a collapse. The debt bubble has got to collapse. It's an inevitability. It isn't a case of if, it's a case of when, which also speaks to the potential for U.S. reserve currency going away. Who knows? Again, when?
Well, you don't want that to happen.
No,
the problem is,
don't.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that like it's going to create like a whole different set of issues for us to deal with. I mean, what you want is for them to be successful in slowly inflating things to the point where people that aren't playing the game, everybody's always in Canada. I'm always like, I just see people are like not intellectually honest a lot of times because they're apologizing to each other for like things that aren't offensive, like you like cut you in line or something. They apologize like 50 times, but then they talk about how regular people can't afford food. They'll tell you about that, and then they'll tell you about how they just really need to get like a speculative 10-cent stock to go to $3. It's like, what is going on in your brain? I mean, you want to make a fortune, a Wild West fortune, dumping stock on the average person, but you care about them finding enough food, but also you're upset. You apologize for something that didn't happen. It doesn't make it. It's like their brain is scrambled. And so one of the things is like, what's so wrong with wanting to be successful? Like, I've got this book that's super controversial called "The Virtue of Selfishness," I think is the name, and it's all about how like being selfish is intellectually honest because most of those people apologizing to you really aren't sorry. They're just passive aggressive or like they have some kind of like bizarre guilt complex. And so when you change your thinking, you're like, no, I actually want to be independently, established and able to do all the stuff I want to do and take care of my family and everything. I actually want that, So I think that helps you open your eyes to say, well, what do I need to do to get that? Instead of being super apologetic, because otherwise what happens is you just envy people. That's no good. So once you shift, you're like, okay, I know that the guys in charge here, guys and girls in charge here, they want this thing to get bigger. They just don't want it to get bigger too fast. That's the problem. And so what they're doing is you're trying to manage it up, and they got it got too big during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Because people started getting too rich, so they had to like ratchet that back down. And that's why like the Barry Sternlichs of the world are trying to game that part of the system. It's a really hard job for the Fed. As you know, in the newsletter this week, I put in there one specific thing to watch that I think when it goes to zero, the Fed's done. And I think the Fed wants to get a certain amount of money out of the system so that when they need to accommodate the system, they let the system grind away, okay? And then it grinds away, like you spend down your savings, your house bills go up, all this stuff goes up, and they kind of like give the economy a haircut. And then if something bad happens, like if a super connected company fails or something happens that's like people are really upset about, like they're actually going to not just make a poster complaining, they're like throw rocks complaining, then they're able to step in with emergency help and to re-engineer. They want that pace of growth. So they want like 2% loss of value of money every year. And then they even better if they can kind of have that eroding away the value of the last injection that they made to get everything growing again. And they also got to keep you hopeful. So they got to keep you hoping that that you're gonna something real good's gonna happen if you just kind of like keep believing. So I think once you see that, then you see how to play it. It makes it a lot easier than, like wandering around looking for the right podcast or something. I mean, a lot of these people that you're mentioning, it's hard to know if they're really saying what they think, or if some of them are like I don't know. I just think some of these people are like, you can't quite know what they're telling you, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I say that is I want to be really clear about this. Is that I don't believe in conspiracies. Okay, so I think what you do is you got to stop looking for the answer from someone and start looking at the question. Okay, and you got to understand that like I've met people that have been at the top. I've met people that 20 years ago I was writing blog articles about, like this conspiratorial thing. I've met these people now. Okay, so I've gone full circle, and I just think that people are on a quest for power, and they have been that way forever and ever. And there's, as soon as you take off your shoe and swat them like a cockroach, here comes another one. Okay. So once you see that, you realize that it's okay. It's part of the system. There's always going to be Trilateral Commission was before World Economic Forum. And there's always going to be some group, and don't even think about like, what would life be like without them? It will be worse, because there's something about the system that functions with force and resistance.
Yeah.
And evident, sometimes force is heavier than resistance, and sometimes resistance is heavier than force. And what you don't want to change that at all. You just want to be the observer. Okay. And the way you get to that point is you disconnect yourself, you educate yourself, and you stop thinking about things in a static way, and you start thinking that it's complicated, and it's okay that it's complicated. And you're going to do great if you start seeing it for what it is. You're, instead of what you want it to be, you're going to do great. Like, you're going to do so much better than other people, because they're bamboozled and confused. Like their head feels fuzzy, and yours doesn't, because you realize that you're not going for perfection. You're not trying to outsmart the whole system. You're just trying to flow down this river of life that is absolutely perfect. And the only way that you're going to get there is to start that journey and be okay being confused. But I promise you'll get there, and then you'll love it. Now, the bad thing is that you won't have as many friends, because
That's true.
you'll slowly start enjoying quiet more than anything. Instead of keeping your life buzzing with notifications and stimulus all the time, you'll start like really cherishing these times of, just where you have a little bit of solitude, or friends that you have that don't come to you with like stirred up, disturbed. You have friends that, you just want to, they have a hobby in common or something, and you don't like one more thing I want to say about this is, like, I never understood why I would have these rich friends when I was younger, and they like, I would look up to them, and they would hang out with like their gardener or something. And I was just like, what are you doing with that? Well, now I get it. Like, one of my favorite people is my pool guy, right? He says all these like really funny, like accidentally smart things, and he never bothers me for anything. He's never like, could you give me a stock tip, or like, none of that stuff. He's just like making jokes, and you start realizing that, like, this is the cool thing about life is that you're not, there's no like destination. Is that the more you do the process, the more successful you become, and then the more fun you have, and then it feeds on itself, and it just gets bigger and better.
I love what you're saying there, a lot, EB. I think there's just some really profound stuff in what you just shared. There is a place where my sense of it, and within the community that I travel in and the people I listen to, and, 40 years of being in business, where we look at where we are today, my observation is there is a lot of people out there that are, it's almost like we're waiting for the proverbial shoe to drop. Like, there's going to be this shoe to drop. There's something that's going to happen. So in the meantime, life is either suspended, like you're afraid to make any decisions, and or you're chasing after possibilities and trying to make sure that you're ready to survive the inevitable shoe dropping. And you're not really being present, to your point. You're not being present to just what is happening in life and seeing the better side of what really is going on in your day to day. You're so busy looking out into the future and or looking for whatever conspiracy might be there and or insight that you might gain that's because, the war started, it's official, and get ready. There seems to be a lot of that kind of rhetoric, and I'm not suggesting it's rhetoric. There's always a degree of truth to something, but how do we stay present in our life when we're busy worrying and wondering about when is the inevitable tsunami going to hit us and we're going to be wiped out? That's just
it's a static way of thinking. So like what you're taught in the West is that you think about everything static. And so like a perfect example of that is the way that, I grew up in the American South, and it's the way that we're taught about like salvation and eternity and all these. It's like all these words I'm using are all permanent, fixed line, A to B kind of things. Okay. And what you figure out is that life is all these topics that we're talking about. We were trained on these big topics to think in a static, linear fashion. And so it's really hard for us to think in a dynamic fashion. Mm-hmm. And a dynamic fashion means what you're thinking is that there's multiple variability points and that change it into multiple outcomes. And it's the equivalent of going from checkers to chess, and then for going from chess to Go. If you ever played Go, it's like a much infinitely more complicated game than chess. And people get really upset about this because they get immediately panicked about the idea of it, but it's not that complicated. It's kind of like, when you used to drive somewhere and, you didn't have all these GPS on your phone or something. It's like you would run into something along the way and change your course, and variables change and all these things happen. And so people need to realize that economics is fascinating and markets are fascinating and political control of the markets is fascinating because there are multiple inputs. And I always enjoyed this. I didn't want a problem that was just, A and B, goes to C and that's it, end of the story, right? Because as far as I was concerned, somebody stronger than me would just come take the problem away, right? So there's no way I could win at that game. I actually liked things where there's multiple variables because that allowed me to have an advantage. Mm. And instead of being afraid of it, I was thinking, well, it's nothing to be afraid of. I'm going to obviously lose sometimes. And if I'm controlling the amount of exposure I have to the situation, who cares if I can bat 600, I'm in the Hall of Fame. So, I don't need to bat 1,000, right? It's not necessary. And so if people can maybe just hear me say that and think, as humans, we have this mind. It's really powerful, right? And we do nothing to direct it. Like we just kind of like wake up and immediately there's like weeds growing in the garden here. It's like if you bought a computer and you put no software, okay, and then you send it onto the internet, and it's like, I can't believe it got a virus. Well, yeah, it has no software. So something is going to live here, right? So the stuff that you and I are talking about is like what we're trying to share with people is that just start loading software on here. And that comes in the way of learning about things and working on your habits and working on your goals and realizing that life is not, all you got to do is study how your body works to realize that nothing is static. Nothing is static. The people, the doctors that are the smartest will tell you like, we don't totally understand how everything works. It's like an internal medicine guy told me that. He's like, if we're honest, we don't really know how the system works. Okay, so that what that means is that you're going with the flow. You're not. It's not a fixed thing that can't be changed. And so it's important for people to understand that even if you don't understand what we're saying, it's important for you to hear it because this ties in with success 100%. The more you move towards this, the more successful you become because you see opportunities that you didn't see when you were thinking in a static linear
way.
A's got to equal B thing. You can't see anything. You're walking around like this, and you don't know where you're going.
Brilliant. I love it. Hey, listen, EB, I know that you've given me a ton of your time and I appreciate it. I'm just going to start to wind this all down. And I do a little bit of rapid fire stuff just to have some fun and kind of lighten up the, as we wind things down. So you up for some?
Yeah, sure.
Kind of rapid fire? Okay, cool.
Sure.
Okay, really simple. Android or iPhone?
iPhone. No phone would be the best, but you have to be in a place where you really don't care about anything.
Yeah, you really do. And you can't live with China. You cannot exist in China without a phone. So yeah, hopefully we don't get there. Do you have a favorite tune, favorite band? Are you a music guy?
Fish.
What the hell is Fish?
Fish with a PH. I think it's the greatest improvisational rock band alive today in its original form. And I highly recommend people try to catch a show because the four guys are what it is like basically you have these super talented like Juilliard level guys and they start the song and then they kick into like a free form jam and you got to see what happens to the crowd. I probably saw them 6 times last year. And,
Love it. Wow, I'm gonna check it out.
They go to the West Coast. They go to Toronto occasionally, but not really to Canada. But you can they're gonna where they're gonna play is have you seen that new thing they have in Vegas with the ceiling is a screen? They're gonna play at the Sphere. They're gonna play in that in April. But check out Fish.
I will definitely check out Fish.
Yeah.
Favorite movie?
Big Lebowski.
That's okay. Good one. Your room, your desk, or your car? What do you clean first? You don't clean anything.
I don't clean anything.
You have people. I get it.
I have this guy called Figgy that cleans the 3 cars here. Figgy comes over and I never clean anything with the car. And then I have a lady that cleans the office. It's not because I'm too good for it. What it is that like I was telling you about the pool guy, I have really good luck with people in my life with services, and I end up with long-term people like the lady that cleans the office, been 15 years or something. Yeah. And I've got to tell you something. I would let her do whatever. If I come back and something's moved, I don't even. Yeah. It's like she has carte blanche to just like she could leave with something, and I'd say she must have needed it. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get it.
So I kind of like there's a little EB ecosystem and it's really the most enjoyable thing. I mean, you wouldn't believe how much fun it is to have happy people around helping you for long, like decades.
It's fantastic. I totally get it. The book that had the most impact on you, or one of the books that had the most impact?
That's an easy one. Fountainhead.
Yeah, that's never been. I mean, listen, I've done a few hundred shows, and nobody's ever said to me, "Fountainhead."
I used to give it away. I stopped giving it away. I used to keep a big case of the book and give it away. And I found that when you give people a book, they don't read it. So Fountainhead, if you are watching this or listening, and you are at a place where like I want you to picture E.B. Tucker waking up at 4:30 in the morning with a cup of coffee and reading Fountainhead, so that he wouldn't be interrupted. This was me way back in the day. Like that book shaped. It's a fiction book. Okay. And what it is that the author is telling you a story to illustrate very important philosophy. And you don't know it, but it's like sugar the pill, right? So what I found was I that book came to me at a time when I was ready to take that philosophy, and it absolutely changed the whole course of my work and personal life. Wow. Very powerful.
Very, very cool. I will definitely be looking that one up. If heaven exists, what do you want to hear from God when you hit the gates?
Man, I guess what's for dinner? I mean, yeah.
Awesome, man. My final question, EB, what are you grateful for?
I gotta tell you, for kids, but not for the reason you think. It's a guy told me I should have a kid, and he was like, you don't want to miss this experience. And he knew me really well, and your perspective changes completely. So it has nothing to do with like my kids, or I don't even think my kids are that special. Like all the time I tell them we have like intellectual sparring, and I said I could just make another set of you that's just as good. and it's funny because they like, I think you got to spar with them like that. I don't coddle them, but what it is that I'm learning how to appreciate the sensitive parts of myself through my relationship with the kids.
Yeah, I love it. I'm always grateful to have a guest on my show and meet somebody new and have some time to have a conversation with them. And grateful for my family, my wife, my amazing wife, and all that I do. And really grateful to be able to produce a show like this and attract great guests. So EB, I want to say thanks again. I hope we can do this again sometime. We never even scratched the freaking surface about what I wanted to get into around your book and, some of your royalty stuff.
Part two.
Yeah. And have an EB part 2.
Yeah.
Thanks again for your time. Very, very appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. If you found value in the podcast, please take the time to rate and review and share with others. Share with your friends. As it is my goal to always improve and to provide the highest value for you, the listener. If you have any comments, suggestions, or questions you'd like answered, please email me at ceo@reincanada.com. That's ceo@reincanada.com. I look forward to hearing from you. And until next time, Patrick out.